Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Favorite Live Album by Year. All right, we're doing this each and every day throughout the month of September. 30 days, 30 favorite live albums, 30 favorite runner-ups. So 60 total live albums we'll be talking about. Although in 1976 I talked about a little bit more than two, but that's okay. You got some additional honorable mentions on a year. 1976 is probably one of the greatest years of live albums ever. Well, let me tell you something. 1979, which is where we're at today, it's not much different. Some really, really good ones here. I had two no-brainers. One I'm going to mention just because it's so good. It's literally sitting at number 3, and the three of them together are amazing. That's Pat Travers Live. Go for What You Know. But that's not one of the top two, right? But I did want to mention Pat Travers Band, one of the greatest bands of all time, right? That lineup, amazing. But today, my favorite, probably not a big surprise to many. This is one of the more notable hard rock live albums of all time. This particular live album also won the Sea of Tranquility Classic Live Album Award that we did back, going on almost 2 years ago now. Can you believe it? Released January 1979 on the Chrysalis label. Recorded at various dates between October 13th and 18th, 1978. International Amphitheater in Chicago. Louisville Gardens in Louisville, and the Record Plant Mobile Studio, right? Because, of course, there's a little bit of touching up in the studio. Of course, I'm talking about Strangers in the Night by UFO. This, of course, the expanded CD edition. The original album edition was a double album. And what they did with the CD reissue was try to... other than adding a couple tracks, too, they tried to do the running order as they played it live on that tour. So I'm going to read you the songs. Almost everything on here is legendary classic UFO. Of course, this is the lineup of Phil Mogg, Pete Way, Andy Parker, Paul Raymond, and a guy named Michael Schenker. Perhaps you've heard of him. All right, Hot and Ready, Cherry, Let It Roll, Love to Love, Natural Thing, Out in the Street, Only You Can Rock Me, Mother Mary, This Kid's, Doctor Doctor, I'm a Loser, Lights Out, Rock Bottom, Too Hot to Handle, and Shoot Shoot. I mean, yeah, these are probably, out of all those albums that they did with Schenker early on, so Phenomenon, Force It, No Heavy Pettin', Lights Out, and Obsession, you probably have 90% of the mandatory tracks from all those albums, maybe 85, because there are some stuff that didn't make, that they didn't play on tour here that I would have liked to have heard. And of course, this, if you bought the Strangers in the Night expanded, right, so you got a little bit of everything. Of course, you can pack it up and go, and a few other things that they did play on that tour. But yeah, I mean, this is just absolutely incredible. Some of the definitive versions of these songs are on this live album. It's just kind of weird how, Michael looks back on this live album and he's not very happy with his playing on the album. And most of us who have grown up with this album and adore this album, wonder what he's thinking, because some of his best guitar soloing is contained right here, ever. So, yeah, I mean, this had to be my favorite. I mean, this is just a band just absolutely peaking at the time, and it's just a real shame that UFO couldn't kind of parlay the success they were starting to have, because, Lights Out and Obsession did fairly well here. They weren't big sellers by any means, but they were becoming a band that was starting to really get noticed, and then, everybody was all over this, but then you blink and Michael's already gone. And then, the Paul Chapman era starts. They released some good albums too, but I think that momentum kind of stalled, right? None of the albums, in my opinion, that they did after really quite lived up to the handful that they did with Schenker in the 70s. But anyway, that is my pick for 1979. Really a no-brainer there for me. My runner-up I love a lot, and if it was any other year, would have been a landslide choice. I am talking about the album that was released September 17th, 1979, recorded February 10th and 15th of that same year at the Kosai Nenkin Hall and Nakano Sun Plaza in Tokyo, Japan, released on the Columbia label, produced by Tom Allom and the band I'm talking about, of course, Unleashed in the East by Judas Priest. Another one of those classic, should have been a double live albums, right? And we all know, a lot of the history behind here. So they played these concerts in Tokyo. Rob Halford, their vocalist, had like the flu or something like that. So his vocals were not all that good. The recordings they had, the band was absolutely on fire. So legend has it they went into the studio and Rob re-recorded some of the vocals. And you have a spectacular sounding live album, right? But again, kind of like with the Kiss Alive thing, how much of it is live? Well, you know what? You got enough that's live. Doesn't matter to me. I don't really care. I think it's just a tremendous sounding album with, again, some absolutely, mandatory versions of these songs, if not the definitive versions of these songs. Again, I have the Live in Japan, Priest in the East. This is the reissue with extra stuff, but regardless whether it's the reissue or the original, it's still absolutely amazing. Exciter, Running Wild, Sinner, The Ripper, Green Manalishi with the two-prong crown. I mean, the cover of the Fleetwood Mac classic, how heavy did they do it? How cool did they do it? Diamonds and Rust, cover of the Joan Baez classic. Again, taking kind of like a folk pop tune, turn it into this big heavy metal anthem. Victim of Changes, absolutely jaw-dropping killer on here. Genocide, so crunchy and heavy. And, of course, Tyrant, amazing. Amazing. And then, with various reissues and things, you've got, Rock Forever, Delivering the Goods, Hellbent for Leather, Starbreaker, just fantastic additional tracks they played on that tour. They also play Beyond the Realms of Death. So again, Priest, just absolutely amazing. Of course, this was Rob Halford, KK Downing, Glenn Tipton, Ian Hill, and Les Binks on drums. Arguably, Les Binks probably one of the greatest drummers they ever had in the band. Scott Travis also in that consideration, but Les Binks, an amazing drummer, never gets enough credit for the work he did with Judas Priest. So, great period in the history of Judas Priest, right? But, of course, this would kind of end of an era, move into the next era, right, as the band moves into the 80s, and much, much bigger critical and commercial acclaim. And, So there you have it. Two outstanding, mandatory hard rock metal live albums, UFO, Strangers in the Night, Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East. Again, these are both the expanded reissues, but whether you have these or whether you have the originals, amazing either way. So in the comments below, please list your favorite live album from 1979 and your favorite runner-up. All right, and your runner-up. And we move into the 80s, starting tomorrow, right? We rampaged through the 70s, talked about a lot of great live albums. There's more to come. The 80s weren't quite the 70s as far as prolific live albums, but some really good ones in this decade as well, as we will see. And then, the 90s, we get the newer ones, slim pickings with some of the newer ones. More of you have certain bands, legacy bands who are releasing live albums like every year, it seems. But then, a lot of the lesser known, younger bands releasing live albums every so often. But again, the 90s weren't really known as a decade for live albums. People weren't paying close attention to live albums in the 90s, unfortunately. But what you started to see more of in the 90s and even into the 2000s are these archival live releases, right? So all of a sudden, these recordings that have been sitting in the vaults for 20, 30 years coming out, and we're getting all these cool live records in the 90s from stuff that was recorded and never released from the 60s and 70s. So you'll be seeing a lot of those in the 90s, right? Those archival live releases. So stay tuned for that. And a lot more here on the channel. So we've got coming up tomorrow, of course, is the Hudson Valley Squares. Off for last week, but the topic we were going to discuss last week will be happening tomorrow. We're going to be taking a look at two pretty cool albums from a band that had two one-album lineups, right? Never to be heard from again. Deep Purple's Come Taste the Band, of course, featuring Tommy Bolin on lead guitar, replacing Richie Blackmore, and Slaves and Masters, featuring Joe Lynn Turner, replacing Ian Gillan. One-time lineups, only albums they ever released from each lineup, so we're going to be talking about them, what we like about them, what we don't like about them. We're going to pick a favorite, everybody on the team, so that's coming up tomorrow. Tuesday, we've got a pretty cool show coming up on Tuesday on In the Prog Seat. So what we're doing is we're going to go back to our high school graduation year, the year we finished school. All right, the year we finished high school. What were some of our favorite prog albums? Prog rock, prog metal, jazz fusion, that's what we talk about on In the Prog Seat, from our graduation year. Whether we were listening to them at the time or whether we started listening to them later on, but they actually were released in that year that we graduated. So that's what we're going to be talking about on Tuesday night. We've got a whole crew ready for that. Wednesday is What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility Day, so hopefully we get a couple of new album releases for you on Wednesday. Thursday is The Monsters Den. We've got a pretty cool program on Thursday, so we're going to be talking about those horror sequels that really sucked. So stay tuned for that. Friday morning at the Funhouse, Martin Popoff and I will be talking about some of our favorite hired guns. All right, so those musicians who just seem to pop up everywhere on a lot of bands' albums, a lot of solo things. It just these guys would just pop up here, there, and everywhere. Everybody wanted to work with them, but they never stayed anywhere for too long. So hired guns coming up on Friday, and then of course we've got the album homework assignment on Sunday. This week should be pretty epic. Louis Nasser going head to head with Chris Allo. They've been given their assignments. They'll be listening to them all week, and we'll be hearing what they have to say about them on Sunday. So stay tuned for that, and all sorts of other things happening on the channel. Simon Bray is coming back on Sea of Tranquility once again. He and I are going to be ranking our favorite Charlie Daniels Band albums, as well as our favorite Doc Holliday albums. So it's some Southern Rock episodes for all you Southern Rock fans. We'll be covering those two bands this week. In the future, we'll be tackling the Marshall Tucker Band as well. So we want to get more. We've just a few Southern Rock bands we haven't quite covered yet. So we're going to get to them. And of course, Simon is one of those rare guys from the UK who just loves U.S. Southern Rock. So Simon and I will be discussing that this week. Also, Rand Kelly and I will be ranking the albums of Greenslade, that classic 70s prog act led by, of course, keyboardist extraordinaire David Greenslade. So that is coming up this week as well. So lots happening here on the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click on that notification bell so you don't miss any of our content as it posts. If you want to make a donation to the channel so we can continue to buy more cool music and movies to help fill up holes in catalogs and rank and review and all that kind of good stuff, the link to our Ko-Fi page is below, as well as the link to Sea of Tranquility's merch site, where we can get all sorts of cool Sea of Tranquility shirts and hoodies and hats and caps and stickers and coffee mugs and all that fun stuff. And of course, the link to seatranquility.org, our webzine that is celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. So stay tuned for that and a lot more. I am Pete Pardo. Have a good one. See you soon. Bye-bye.